Salutations, everyone. This is Razor here, bringing you guys another AOE podcast. I know it's been a bit, but hey, we're back and we're going to talk about Star Wars. Star Wars as a whole, the current state of the entirety of the franchise. I'm talking on all aspects, not just the last upcoming movie. And, obviously talking about the future. We have the Skywalker saga ending here in just a couple of months in the Rise of Skywalker, and we'll get into that probably a little bit toward the end. I really want to focus on the state of Star Wars as it has become a Disney property, right? So starting with Force Awakens, going all the way through the many different media properties and things that the entirety of the franchise has gone through, and then start to talk about Rise of Skywalker. So recently, I have watched all of the Disney Star Wars movies. There's four of them. You got the first two of this third saga, and then you also have the two Star Wars stories of Solo and Rogue One. So I watched all of them recently. All four of them. Not very many, but it's not like having to watch every single Star Wars movie before Force Awakens, which a lot of us did, including myself, just those few years ago. So, a reflection back on those movies, starting with Force Awakens, I thought was amazing. And there was so much writing on this movie. It was Disney's first attempt at revitalizing this franchise after getting it from George. Obviously, the plan was always to make more movies, and people will constantly rag on Disney for trying to make money because they're a company and they're in the business of making money, and they're really good at it. And those typically are always the companies that are the most criticized for, trying to make money. It's like, yeah, they're like the best at it. Like, people shit on mobile games. Why? Because they make a shit ton of money, right? Because people love them. People love to hate on things they're really, really popular. And they're really easy targets when they're like corporations that have really bad practices or have a lot of controversy or aren't treating these people correctly or relationships with these countries, yada, 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 yada. There's a lot of reasons. But Disney and their quality for their entirety of their company, especially over the past 20 years or so, there's, people often love to rag on Disney for how tight that they hold on to their properties and like the legal stuff of like trademark of Mickey Mouse. That was a whole thing. And them changing the laws, basically just flexing their huge amount of power that they have as a company to ensure the benefit and longevity of their properties and their bottom dollar, right? They made plenty of follies, and they've also had a ton of successes with the Marvel movies, Star Wars movies, the animated movies. We got Frozen 2 coming out. That's going to probably break a bunch of records. Lion King just broke all the records for animated film. And, we could talk about those remakes in a completely different podcast, but Disney's pretty darn good at doing what they do and how they handle their franchises, whether it's litigiously or just quality assurance. All of those are real aspects of what makes Disney good and or bad, right? So they're very careful with their properties, and especially with something like Star Wars that's so long established and beloved and obviously had quite a few missteps along the way. It was very important for them to come out swinging with a home run with Force Awakens, and they did. They broke a ton of records. I still think Force Awakens has the opening weekend record domestically for a movie, I believe. It still has like one record that still hasn't been broken. But it was a humongous success, and it was overall beloved. And if any of you watched my rant video on Star Wars fans, that was made before The Force Awakens, and I made some predictions based off of the past of Star Wars fans, which I as a whole are just like any other very large fan base of a very popular medium or property, right? But Star Wars fans have always just rubbed me the wrong way in the things that they say and do, right? And if you want to me elaborate on that, you could just watch my Star Wars rant video, and is it in the rant playlist. But one of the things that I said was, even as Force Awakens is really good, and everyone acknowledges that it's good, eventually it'll become hated. And it did. There was a lot of detractors, a lot of people that didn't like it, but overall was received universally very well, and even more so than the prequel movies are. I think I think it'd be very difficult to argue against that point. But it was a success, and you definitely cannot argue that at all. Of course, you had people with their ludicrous ideas and thoughts of what Star Wars should be and what it needs to be and what it has to be, because people hold this property specifically more personally than any other property. And there's a lot of reasons for that, because it might be A New Hope, Star Wars Episode 4, whatever you want to call it. It might be the most important film that was ever made. And ever will be made, because of what it did for so many things, for the hero's journey, for storytelling, for the cinematics, the computer graphics, sci-fi, fantasy, everything. It inspired so many people to do so many things that are, now in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, right? That have continued to shape how entertainment is today. So its ripple effects, I think, are further reaching than any other single media event in history. More so than like King Kong or, sound in film or anything. It's just shaped the minds and the focus of pop culture more so than anything else. Its influence is everywhere. And I think for a lot of great reasons. So many people grew up on those initial movies, right? So, and people have these weird ideas in their head, and they get super invested in the extended universe, which is now Star Wars Legends. Those things are no longer canon, and people have to get over that. Yes, we lost some really great things from those books and comics and games and things like that. But we also, lost some bad things that some of the good things were picked up, like the Timothy Zahn books. Those were Thrawn. Yeah, it's Thrawn. Thrawn was brought back, right? So not everything was lost, and the spirit of things were still kept in characters and storylines that we still have seen. So everything starting with Force Awakens is canon in all media, from the comics to the novels to the video games to the movies, obviously. All of that is canon now. It all has to cohesively mesh. You could say that can stifle creativity, and yes, it absolutely does. It kind of has to, right? Because whenever a video game developer or an author wants to do something with the story, it has to go through the proper channels at Disney. Be like, no, you can't do that. No, this has to be this. No, you can't mention them because we're going to do this with that. So there's a lot of hurdles. I had a conversation with, I think it was the VP of sales or advertising at We Love Fine. I met him at Comic-Con 3 years ago. I think it was the year after Force Awakens came out, I do believe, or it was just before. It was a while ago, but I had a long conversation with him, talking about Disney and what they were allowed to do on their T-shirts and other various clothing items with the Star Wars characters. And he said that they weren't allowed to make fun of Kylo Ren, right? You couldn't make him the butt of a joke, of an emo joke or whatever on their clothing. The only thing that they were allowed to make fun of in a comedic manner, when it comes to degrading a character, were stormtroopers. They were the only character that was free for them to shit on, like, you know, like make fun of their aim or call them losers or whatever, right? They weren't allowed to do that with any other character, only the stormtroopers in that specific way. So Disney has a huge say in absolutely everything in what happens with all of their properties, right? It's a bit of a vice grip. So you have some give and take with the people that they get to work with, right? Like the amazing Captain Twaz, or as it goes by, Twaz nowadays. He's done some work with Disney and Star Wars. But they also, some of those, you know, great creative people are restricted in the characters that they can use, or the way that they portray those characters, or planets that they visit, or how far they can go in certain timelines, right? So there is a bit of a give and take there. And Disney has a lot of creative directors, and I absolutely believe in everything that the Star Wars creative leads have done, starting with Force Awakens. And while nothing has been perfect, I don't know if like there's a lot of people that love everything that Disney has done with Star Wars since they gained the rights to the property, and you can make arguments about, you know, monopolies and corporations getting too big, which are absolutely fine, but not what we're going to talk about today. The point is, Disney has a strong hold on their property for good and for bad, right? And Force Awakens, I think, was a fantastic movie. Yes, people can say it's just a rehash of A New Hope, right? You have a droid that has a secret, you know, data chip that needs to be found, that the stormtroopers and everybody's looking for, and you have this desert orphan who has this connection with the Force, who's, you know, gets this lightsaber, and there's a, you know, this star, there's this giant orb in space that can blow up planets, right? Okay, we'll give it that. Some people said that JJ relied too much on nostalgia, and then everyone shit on Rian Johnson for basically trying to destroy everything, right? The Kylo Ren line was, you know, what was it? Something about leave the past behind, kill it if you have to, right? It was something to that effect. And that seemed to be the theme, right, of the second film, was that, you know, this isn't going to end the way you think, right? You know, he destroys the Kylo Ren mask, and you know, Snoke gets killed, right? It subverted a lot of expectations and things like that. While people were like, yay, Millennium Falcon, yay, Lando's back, you know, like, Chewbacca, you know, people, you have to have like a good mix of both. You can definitely appreciate both points of view, while not trying to rely too heavily on one or the other. You can argue that Force Awakens was one side of the spectrum, and that, what is the second freaking movie called? I just watched it. The Last Jedi was the other side of the spectrum, right? I think Force Awakens was a much better film. The set pieces, obviously you have John Williams doing the music, and he stayed on. He was just going to do Force Awakens, but he stayed on because he didn't want anyone else to write music for Rey, Daisy Ridley's character. And I absolutely appreciate that. I love Rey. Obviously you have all these man-baby crying detractors saying like, oh, the females are not welcome in Star Wars. They can't be the main character. This is about male fantasy. Fuck those people, right? Fuck them. Leave them in a ditch and forget them. They can die mad about it, right? And you'll never hear the end of it whenever it comes to a female being in Star Wars. We're like, oh my gosh, first Force Awakens with Rey, and now, you know, Jyn Erso in Rogue One. Oh man, women are ruining my boy fantasy. Fuck those people, right? I thought Force Awakens was amazing. I thought the casting was amazing. You know, Kylo Ren, very, very well casted. They didn't go for like someone evil, someone like they didn't go like the Anakin route, right? Adam Driver, I thought, was like a great pick. You know, before Force Awakens, I only read like he was in that Girls HBO show, right? So I didn't know him personally, and I've seen him in like Logan Lucky and other things since then. He's very good comedic actor, and he can do drama very well. Like his cadence and the rhythm of his voice is very good, whether with the Kylo mask on or just being Ben Solo. his passion and his anger. It's fantastic. Rey and her bit of naivete, and as well as just her spark of joy is fantastic. You love the story of Finn, right? A stormtrooper getting his first sight of what the First Order is and being able to turn. And of course you had all the Star Wars fans when the first trailer comes out. It was like, a stormtrooper can't be black, blah, 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 blah. Obvious idiots. It's like they never watched the first 3 movies, right? Clearly they were not clones in the trig because they were different heights and had different voices. And we know that they ran out of clones. Like, Star Wars fans are like the quote unquote hardcore Star Wars fans are usually like the least knowledgeable Star Wars people out there, because they love to like frame their own narrative while just ignoring everything else that has been established in the canon, right? So I thought all the characters were great. Poe, amazing, just being that ace pilot, like better than anything we've seen, better than Luke, better than Anakin, because like we've set the stage of like, in order for something to be impressive in fiction where you can do whatever you want, you have to establish a baseline. It's like, this is what is normal. And then Poe comes in and fucking destroys 11 TIE fighters in 8 seconds, like the baddest badass of all time. That was just insane. And every single movie has had its money shot, whether it be Force Awakens, when Rey gets the lightsaber, right? At that final battle with Kylo, where he's reaching for the lightsaber. And it's like, in the theater, I was like, it's going to fly past them and Rey's going to get it. It's like, I knew it was going to happen. And then it happened, and it still fucking took my breath away. It was just an amazing shot. And the swell of the John Williams music and that cold, dark, barely red illuminated forest. It was just, it was so good. And then you have people ragging on, that fight, right? Whereas like, oh man, how did Kylo lose? You have, Finn, this guy that never holds a light, he wasn't trained, Rey wasn't trained. It's like, dude, the dude was fucking blasted full on by a Wookiee bowcaster. That thing makes people fly in normal. You hit a storm. We saw earlier in that same movie, hits a stormtrooper, right? Han takes it, boom, they go flying. Wookiee bowcasters are no joke. This dude took one to his freaking chest and was, clearly in a lot of pain. You see him pounding. Sith, they thrive off of anger and pain to channel that into their power, right? And also Finn was trained on the baton like his partner Nines, the guy who says traitor, right? He was trained on that, and he uses it in The Last Jedi against Phasma. And it's like, a lot of Star Wars fans are really dumb. It's like, oh man, how this guy who's never, it's like, he was trained on a melee weapon and he's got a fucking lightsaber, and Kylo was injured. By the way, Kylo dispenses of him in just a few seconds. Like, he destroyed him in that fight, right? It's like people forget that that's what happened. And then you have Rey, who's clearly coming into her own as a Force user, is learning what those powers are. And as Snoke said, when I saw, Kylo rise, I knew there would be a Force of the Light to match it. And I thought it was going to be Luke, but it turns out to be this chick, right? So there has to be a balance because it's the Force. So that fight was perfectly fine. And also, he's like not trying to kill her. He's trying to defeat her, and he's like, you need a teacher. He wants to turn her. He's, so it was absolutely not a fair fight. And Kylo was, on the front foot. And then like it was a pretty darn good fight. And I think it was very, very well handled. It didn't show that Kylo was like too weak. It didn't show that that Finn or Rey were too strong or anything like that. It was dramatic and it was poignant, and it helped develop the story and also allow it to continue, right? So I feel like The Force Awakens was a fantastic movie. Now, when we come to The Last Jedi, I feel like that was a step back, and a lot of other people did not enjoy the film. I feel like I've enjoyed it more each time that I have viewed it. And, you could say there's a couple of reasons for that, because you have your expectations tempered, or you're able to focus on other things, or like the flow of the story doesn't catch you off guard, because it definitely did the first time I saw it in theaters. Because, it only the entire movie takes place within like a day. And yeah, the side mission with Finn and Rose wasn't that great, right? It ended up not only being irrelevant to anything that actually happened in the movie, but it actually ended up backfiring, because Benicio del Toro turns on them, tells them about the plan of the escape pods, and then a bunch of them get killed, right? So if Finn and Rose didn't do anything, then more people are able to escape to Crate, and more people will be able to survive for the Rise of Skywalker, right? Whereas now, where the Resistance seems to just be a couple of dozen people. I mean, no more than the Falcon can fit, right? And yes, Leia did mention that they have allies, in the Outer Rim, including obviously, you have Zay Versio, the daughter of Iden Versio, the main character from Star Wars Battlefront 2. Which is an amazing video game and is just a fun-having machine, and has a fantastic campaign. I know it got a lot of negative press because of microtransactions that were then rolled back, that were absolutely overblown. I made my own video about that, especially being a Battlefront veteran and someone who played the game a lot, both in beta and post-release. And it got tons of free DLC, as the first one did, and we'll get even more DLC once the Rise of Skywalker comes out. So it's, always getting more and more content, and it's almost always free. And people that are continuing to play the game are just having a ton of fun. But a lot of people tend to forget that game had a campaign, which a lot of people hated Battlefront 1 for not having a campaign, even though all the data shows that multiplayer games, people don't play the campaigns that are attached to them. That's why Call of Duty dropped their campaign entirely, right? They took a look at the data and were like, no one plays campaigns, so we're just not going to do it, and we're going to focus on multiplayer, which is the reason why everyone buys the game, right? And that's true. It's absolutely true. And then Battlefront 2 comes out with a campaign, and nobody talks about it, and it's freaking amazing. The story of Iden Versio, you have, a freaking an amazing character on the bad side of things, starting with the death of the Star Destroyer, the Death Star in the Return of the Jedi, going all the way to basically the beginning of The Last Jedi. We have that entire timeline. We got some data, we got some story, which we hadn't gotten before, and we aren't going to get until Mandalorian comes out on Disney Plus, which is going to be fantastic. And we're going to get, a nice little extra story taking place within that large chunk of time. So Iden Versio and everything that she did was absolutely fantastic, with her strike force and being able to see what happened to the Empire afterwards. And then you got to look at, what was Luke doing during that time, and Han, and we got to see Lando's part when he was on Sullust and blew up that factory. It's just obviously, as a Lando fanboy myself, absolutely loved it, and he's fantastic in that game. But we got to learn a lot about the dying embers of the Empire and how that turned into the First Order with Operation Resurrection, which was awesome to see. And it filled in so many, blanks that we had questions for seeing Force Awakens, and even for The Last Jedi. And that was really awesome to see. So if you have not played Battlefront 2, highly recommend. It's probably quite cheap right now, or watch a Let's Play of it. It's a really, really good story. And especially for those extended universe fans, I mean, this thing has everything. It's a long stretch of time. It touches on a lot of characters that you know, as well as characters that you didn't know, and the huge impact that they have had on the large grand Skywalker saga. And it'll be great to see, because Zay was able to give Leia the dreadnought plans, then and was able to escape give her the Dreadnought plans, and then Leia was like, no, go to the Outer Rim. The First Order's found us. And then we're like, boom, that's the end. So we know that Zay is out there on the Outer Rim trying to group up with the allies that the Resistance has, and to gather more allies. So it would be really cool to see Zay, or at least like her ship or something in the Rise of Skywalker. I would absolutely love to see that. We saw in the new trailer or the final trailer that the ship from one of the animated Star Wars shows and comics is there. So they've done a pretty good job at trying to incorporate all of their media into one thing. Speaking of which, I've had a couple of trips to Galaxy's Edge down at Disneyland in Anaheim, California, on the planet Batu, and it's amazing. It's amazing what Disney did with that area and the little bit of land that they had left, right? If only Disneyland could be as big as, Disney World is, with, all that super cheap swampland that Walt bought so many years ago. But the Galaxy's Edge experience, it's fantastic. You saw a lot of people making these bullshit videos about how it's a huge failure and Disney is in shambles and how no one's coming to the park. Or it was just lies and clickbait, which should have been obvious to anybody on the outset. But I've been there in person multiple times. The first month that it was unleashed to the public, and I went just last week as well. That place is booming. It is busy. It is thriving. And just until this past month, they could not keep things on the shelves. They were out of Kyber crystals. They were out of these Leia pins. They were selling out of things constantly. You would have to check everything a week. Did they get more of this? Did they get more of this? Like, they didn't have Kyber crystals from like June, July, and August. And just now you can finally come and buy Kyber crystals, but you still only can get one of each kind per person, right? So that place is thriving. The little marketplace that they have there, there's so many Easter eggs where you see the Sarlacc pit with the Ghostbusters proton pack writings on it, and you have Han's little speeder from Solo. They're like a child version of it with a bunch of other speeders. Everything is in universe there. So all of the cast members they're from Batu. You're on a different planet. It's not like annoying bullshit like medieval times where what are these magical devices you're holding? I don't know about, John, I don't know about this beer, but we have grog, none of that annoying bullshit. But you pay with credits, and nothing in Galaxy's Edge has the moniker of Star Wars on it because you are on the planet. You're not buying Star Wars merch. You're on planet Batu buying their wares, right? And they have the blue milk and the green milk, which is amazing. The blue milk is so fucking good. The Ronto roasters, which are these hot dogs and pita bread, really, really good. You have the Docking Bay 9 or 8, I think it is, which is the main eating area. The Smuggler's Run, Captain Falcon, or Millennium Falcon ride. That one, I wouldn't give that one an A+. I've been on the ride a couple of times. The engineer is kind of useless. The gunner seems kind of useless. I haven't been able to be the pilot yet, which is by far the most important thing. And if you have some drunk idiot or a little kid on it, it definitely is kind of frustrating. Seeing people not know what left and right mean, but that's a general public problem and not really the ride's problem. But it's a fun experience. It's a great atmosphere. Seeing full-size replica of X-Wings and the Millennium Falcon and Kylo's carrier and all the characters walking around. There are no meet and greets or photo ops. They're all just walking around. It's very immersive. They do a great job building a droid. I've seen a couple of people build droids. That's a fantastic experience. I built my own lightsaber along with my dad. That was a great experience. Super expensive. You have to get reservations, first thing in order to get that. So they're making $300,000 a year on just those lightsabers alone, or something ridiculous. Maybe it was 900, maybe it was 2 million. I don't remember. But that land is having no problem raking in money, and they did such a fantastic job, and their main attraction isn't even open yet. So that won't happen till January or in December if you're at Disney World, Galaxy's Edge, in the Rise of the Resistance ride, which promises to be a fantastic new evolution in theme park rides, right? So what Disney did with that, with Galaxy's Edge, absolutely a home run. Being able to build a droid, fantastic. The lightsaber building experience, Olga's Cantina, the pod racer roasting the Ronto roasters, all the different little shops and the little puppets. Yes, it can be very, very pricey. Obviously, you're Disneyland, so nothing's not going to be pricey, right? But the experience and all of the Easter eggs, all the interaction at that place with, whether you're on your phone doing the little hacking, smuggler things, or if you're building a lightsaber, or if you're just eating the food, or seeing the stormtroopers and Kylo and Rey and Chewie walk around. Just absolutely fantastic. It's my favorite part of the park, and I've been a couple of times now, and I absolutely love it every single time. And they're doing very well. So don't believe all of those, pictures where nobody's in it. That's all like pre-release, like promotional stuff. None of that is actual footage, because I've been there in person. If you look on any Disneyland vlogger that do, theme park obsessions or whatever, that, they go over food or they go over rides or construction of things going on in the park, everyone will tell you that it's fantastic, that they did a really good job, and that it's always busy, because it is. And so Disney's done a great job with that aspect. And I cannot wait for the Rise of the Resistance ride that will be opening in January. Don't know when I'll be able to experience that. But Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland, they handle that absolutely incredibly well. And some people will say, oh, it's only got one ride, or, it will only have two rides. I think that's fine. Otherwise, because making a tiny little kiddie ride that doesn't take up a lot of space isn't really going to fit in well with the rest of that part of the park, and there's like a shit ton of rides everywhere else, right? So I think they did a very, very good job. Yes, Smuggler's Run isn't like the greatest interactive experience that there is, but it is fun to experience it once or twice. There are multiple ways to experience the ride, and even if you are in the same role, there are different endings to that ride. So it's like, it's not a bad ride. Definitely worth experiencing, and the line is usually not much longer than an hour, so it's a very, very good experience. And I already mentioned Battlefront 2, an amazing game. So was Battlefront 1, and you had the Force Awakens Lego game, which I enjoyed a lot. And of course, they're coming out with the giant Star Wars Lego game here. Hopefully, pretty soon we get some more info on that. But the Disney brand has done a great job at managing the Star Wars property, and not just for making money or having everything quality, but to just keep everything cohesive and together. I haven't read any of the comics or the novels. I've heard some really great things, especially about the Timothy Zahn novels, and I am very interested in reading those Poe comics, where like both of his parents, they were rebel fighters, and then after the Empire crumbled, they often went and retired together and had this super awesome baby named Poe. So I would be very much interested in reading some of those. But all in all, I think, while yes, people say, oh, it's money grubbing, and they're trying to monopolize December, right? Like that's when they've released their movies, with Force Awakens and with Rogue One and with The Last Jedi. And Solo was a bit of a misstep. That one did not go over, I think, as well as the stockholders had envisioned or hoped for that movie. And well, let's talk about Rogue One first. So Rogue One, I think, is really good. I think it's one of the best Star Wars movies, as it contains Solo story. Sorry to conflate it with another movie called Solo, but as a self-contained single movie story, it is very, very good. Being able to see what the Resistance was, and some people could make fun of it for trying to explain away the the duct that Luke shoots the proton torpedo into to destroy the Death Star. That's been a thing that's been made fun of ad nauseum about, the contractor messed up, or the Empire was too frugal to cover that thing up. It's like, it's a vent. It needs to have some ventilation. The thing is blasting planets apart with a huge supply of kyber crystals. That thing's going to need some goddamn ventilation. You're goddamn right it does. But I think it was a very clever and very cool way to incorporate that weakness into just its own story. It was just like almost like a one line from the first Star Wars movie gave us an entire other film. I don't think we're going to have another entire movie about many Bothans died to give us this information. I don't think we're going to get that, right? I don't think every little thing deserves its own movie, or maybe even like its own comic book or graphic novel or novel or anything like that. But what they were able to do with Jayden Erso's story, I think, was really cool. And being able to see Cassian, who's, if you don't know, is getting his own show on Disney Plus. It's going to be our own Cassian show. Back with K2SO, Alan Tudyk, Disney's good luck charm, much like Ratzenberg is to Pixar, right? And he's done a fantastic job in all of his roles that he has done. And they've done a great job in, I think, all of the Star Wars movies at doing characters well. Seeing what the kind of the nitty gritty, the darker aspect of the Rebel Alliance, that you had to see Cassian. He killed a guy. He was an informant. He was a good guy. He was trying to do the right thing, but he was going to blow their cover, right? So Cassian, yeah, he did have to kill him. That was the smart and only thing to do. The dude was dead anyway. He was just, doing what he could to survive himself. And he talked about, we've all done despicable things in the name of the rebellion, and, we need to do something. And not having the entire Rebel Alliance in on going for the plans based off of, hearsay on a recording that Jade no longer has was... I think I think that entire movie was handled very well. You had really good actors. You had a good storyline. It was more of a it was a groundwards thing. Like, there was no Jedi, right? There wasn't any Sith outside of seeing Darth Maul at the end, which we'll talk about later. In the Solo movie, those two Star Wars story movies, even though we have characters that we know, like Mon Mothma and Han Solo and Chewbacca, or Lando, we were still able to get something out of almost nothing and make it fit perfectly within the Star Wars universe. Now, I think most people really enjoyed Rogue One. There are some people that say that it was even their favorite Star Wars movie. And I think that's a perfectly legitimate, opinion to have, as is loving Phantom Menace, right? Every movie is going to have its fans, and every movie is going to have its detractors, right? Except for some things that people hold a little bit too sacred, if you ask me. Boba Fett. And it did very well in the box office, and then Solo comes out and it doesn't do so well, and Disney's like, oh, okay, we'll pump the brakes a little bit. We don't want people to OD on Star Wars. While we would like to monopolize December and get all the money out of it we can, they still kind of held back and showed a little bit restraint on, but like, okay, we're just going to hold back and focus on our television aspect of Star Wars, right? With The Mandalorian and with whatever Cassian's show is called. I don't even know if it has a name yet, because I don't think it started filming. And I've already seen at Tomorrowland and Disneyland, they had Disney Plus t-shirts. They had a lot of Mandalorian merch, as well as merch coming up for, obviously, Frozen 2, but as well as The Rise of Skywalker, including the little droid that's like a lamp on a wheel. I forget what its name is, but that thing is apparently going to be really popular because they're going all in on the on the merch side of that guy with keychains and zippers and t-shirts of him next to BB-8 being like real cute and stuff. So Disney's usually pretty damn good at knowing what people are going to attach to and like. For the most part. Sometimes you really cannot see a surprise fan favorite character coming out. But, like, for instance, like the little salamander in Frozen 2, Josh Gad says people are going to be obsessed with this little dude. And I believe him. So, and there was plenty of merch for that little salamander out there as well. But, so Solo was a misstep. It wasn't that great. And obviously, when you tackle such a fan favorite, Han Solo, easily the second most popular character through the entire Star Wars fandom, obviously Boba Fett being number one, for reasons that still remain to be deciphered by modern scientists, because that dude does fucking nothing in 2 movies except die like a little chump loser. And no, he did not charge his freaking jetpack and get nursed back to health, because that's just glorified fan fiction now. That's not canon. So who cares about Dungar? Han Solo, very, very popular. Everybody wanted to be Han Solo when they were like a kid, right? Especially like all, the boomers and the Gen X people that grew up with Star Wars. They're like, oh man, Han Solo, he's a badass. He shoots first, and he's cool, and he's a thief, and he doesn't really care about good or evil. He's a bit ambivalent towards that. And then the Solo movie kind of betrays that a little bit. I absolutely understand those criticisms where like this dude actually helped like bankroll the start of the Rebel Alliance, right? Even though at the end he was like, it's not my thing. Here, take this and do your little thing. I'm just gonna go out and do my own thing. I heard that there's a sweet score on Tatooine with this guy named Jabba, right? I get that. And there was a little bit too much winking and nodding to the audience in Solo, as opposed to like Force Awakens or Rogue One. Obviously on Rogue One you had what are the names? The guys from the Cantina bar and Mos Eisley. Damazon, there's a Z in there anyway. But bumping into the pig face guy and butt cheek face alien dude that Obi-Wan chops his arm off and somehow leaves blood, even though it's a lightsaber. But he's an alien. Maybe his anatomy's really fucking weird, and he can't cauterize. I don't know. We can talk all day long about mistakes that George Lucas has made with his movies, even in the good ones, or talk about the good things that he did in the special editions. We won't do any of that. I did some of that in my Star Wars rant video. If you want to check that out, I'm going to plug that once more. So Solo was a bit of a misstep. Obviously, when it comes to tackling that character in particular, A, him being really popular, and B, people having a pretty solidified idea of what that character is and what he should be. People also have their, if this movie isn't my fan fiction, I think it's going to be shit. You have so many Star Wars fans that think like that. But when it comes to Han Solo, he's a smuggler. He's not a good guy, not a bad guy, definitely a good guy, when it comes down to it. But, he's out for himself. He's not, trying to go on some holy crusade and be the White Knight, So, seeing him, act the way that he did for a love interest, I can see both sides of it, where people are like, oh man, that's not Han. He's not all about that. He's about, banging chicks and then leaving them in the next morning. But at the same time, this is early Han Solo. This informed his personality coming forward, and, not getting attached and, swindling other people, and then obviously shooting Woody Harrelson first. That was a nice scene and a nice nod. I didn't have any problem with that. And some people might have had problems with how he was introduced to Chewie and like all of a sudden like knowing how to speak Wookiee or whatever. That's fine. You can have your complaints about it, but it has to be, the character has to start somewhere, right? And they made an attempt. And, some of it made sense, and some of it you see, might not be that true to the character or what you thought he could have been. And that's perfectly legitimate criticism to have. Like, as you talk about the Kessel Run, we knew the Kessel Run was going to be a thing in the Solo story. How could it not, right? people will joke about parsecs being, distance and not time, and then them trying to explain, the fans that actually, yes, it is distance, but, you can have something be impressive by being a shorter distance than anything else. And I absolutely can back that up. I'm on those people's side, right? Sure, George probably didn't know that, but you can explain it away, and it makes sense, and then you can't be angry about it anymore. And I firmly believe that. And while making the Kessel Run made it seem like it's a thing that a lot of people do, it didn't really, I don't know, the way that they approached it with getting raw coaxium from this one mine, it's like, that didn't seem like it's the thing that could have been replicated, let alone something that's like, oh man, this guy's doing the Kessel Run. They even mention it in the movie. It's like, we're making the Kessel Run. And that place didn't have very much security. So it's like, yeah, that wasn't handled amazingly. I did like seeing Lando's co-pilot and her personality, and then going down and then becoming part of the Falcon, and that kind of what makes this Corellian freighter very unique, and it being the Millennium Falcon is because it has this robot that had this amazing navigational system that was the best in the galaxy, kind of makes it unique. And then you have Han, who's just a really good pilot, as well as Chewie, who's a few hundred years old and has been around the block, this guy. So I can get on board with that, and that's pretty appreciative. A lot of people love to hate on the fact that they tried to make the dice like a thing that was important to Han in either The Last Jedi or in Solo story. Well, it was just a prop in the original trilogy, trying to get some sort of sentimental value out of it. I can see why you might not like that, but it is an attempt on trying to tie things in, so you can appreciate that attempt. Whether you think it could have been handled differently or something is a perfectly reasonable argument to have, but I don't have that big of a problem with it. Especially since, once he gets the Falcon, he doesn't leave the Falcon for anything else until, obviously it gets stolen from him right before he gets it back in Force Awakens. So, and, having him bankroll the coaxium for the start of the Rebel Alliance, yeah, I mean, there was really only two different routes that you could have gone with for a Han Solo story. Either make Han Solo play a part in the Tridge backstory, which is what they did, or have him go on some crazy yeehaw Han Solo adventure that has absolutely zero significance to anything else in the Star Wars canon. I think that's what a lot of people were thinking and were expecting from a Han Solo movie. So they were disappointed that they made Han Solo kind of part of the Skywalker saga in a way. Whether it be his role in, helping the Resistance in the start of their fight, or what with his taking down what's his face, Paul Bettany's character, and then having Emilia Clarke's character become the new number one for Darth Maul and his little faction, which is a very interesting thing that I definitely want to get into. But I think that's one of the main reasons why people were disappointed. But you can kind of understand the want to have Han be important, right? Because otherwise he's just doing some crazy little adventure out in space on the Millennium Falcon with Lando and Chewie, and it doesn't matter. Like, the movie doesn't need to exist because it tells a story that is not only ancillary to the Skywalker saga, but completely meaningless. Let's say the movie was him doing some job for Jabba and killing somebody. Now, that still could have been a fun little romp out in space that has good action and some comedy and, a couple of callbacks to the Tridge, right? That is option that they could have gone down. And obviously you have the huge fallout with the original directors of the Lego movie that they tapped to do this Han Solo movie, which the studio heads were like, they're making this into a comedy and we don't like that, so let's fire them and get Ron Howard. You can see it was not the greatest production timeline. So that definitely informs why the movie wasn't as good as we had hoped it to be. But at the same time, with the story that they gave us, you can understand that they want to explain the Kessel Run. They want to explain how he got the Millennium Falcon from Lando. Well, some people hated that they tried to explain too much by, Lando's calling Han on purpose as a bit of a jibe. So that explains why Billy D. Williams called him Han so many times in the original Tridge when it was probably just a mistake, right? Or going over, or how he, at the end of the movie where he is able to take that sabacc card from Lando, where he's like at first angry at Lando for leaving at that refinery for the coaxium, and then he sees that he's cheating and he's like, let me pretend to be friendly and I can steal his card and actually beat him at sabacc and get the Millennium Falcon, is kind of a callback to the introduction on Cloud City, where it looks like Lando's angry, but then he hugs him. He's like, man, how you been? So a lot of people didn't like that, how they explained so much about Han's backstory and Lando's backstory. And this is kind of the same with the whole parsec thing, where you can understand, yes, there were mistakes made back in the 70s, right? But making those mistakes into no longer mistakes, I think it's an admirable thing to do. And I have no problem with Lando, who was portrayed absolutely brilliantly. And when Donald Glover asked Billy D how he needs to play Lando, like, what's his backstory? How do you view him? And Billy was just like, just be cool, man. And he was like, oh, okay, I get it. I'm overthinking. And I think that's definitely true to Lando. The dude is cool. He's awesome. He's got capes and a gun, and he's the original owner of the Millennium Falcon, and he's awesome. That's how I see him. That's how the universe sees him. And I'm so glad to see him, to see Billy D back, after not seeing him in these past two movies. Maybe you can call me stupid for wanting too much nostalgia, but I mean, isn't that what all of these movies have been? Everything has been to harken back to that original trilogy, because it's all the Skywalker saga, from New Hope to Strikes Back to Jedi to Phantom Menace to Attack of the Clones to the Revenge of the Sith to Force Awakens to the Last Jedi to the Rise of Skywalker. We are all still telling the same story, and getting those Star Wars stories in there, whether it be Solo or Rogue One, I think it's definitely, I think it's permissible to try to make it a cohesive story. Now, whatever they plan to do after this, which we've only heard, little bits and pieces of, and rumors of what directors are going to do what. We have, David and Bynos, the Game of Thrones guys are getting their own trilogy, and you have the Last Jedi director getting his own trilogy, which, people have mixed opinions about, so when creative people are able to unhinge themselves from the Skywalker saga and able to do what they want with completely different characters, either removed from time or location from the Skywalker saga, the chains will come off, and they'll definitely have a bit more freedom and probably less crazy productions like Solo had, or characters that people want to see and bring back. Like, who didn't want to see Luke Skywalker come back? And a lot of people had problems with him not coming out with his lightsaber and just destroying Death Stars with single swings. Obviously Luke is one of the most powerful Jedi of all time, bar none. And people had a problem with him projecting himself all the way to Crate, from the original Jedi Temple, even though it is canonically, before the movie, a Jedi power in a book that somebody released. And you even have a little bit of foreshadowing with that when when Kylo and Rey have that Force connection that Snoke created, right? He's when it first happens, Kylo is like, "Are you doing this? No, the strain alone would kill you." So it was clearly a powerful thing that you would make sense that someone as powerful as Snoke, and people have their problems with Snoke not being explained or being killed off. And I think we will get some explanation, whether it's in this last movie or in other book series. It's going to be explained on Snoke and his character, and I don't really have that big of a problem with him being killed off. There is a discussion to be had when it comes to not meeting expectations and as well as subverting expectations. So many people angry about Snoke's demise in The Last Jedi. I think it's a fine subversion of expectations because a lot of people didn't like Force Awakens being a rehash of A New Hope, right, in Episode 4 or Star Wars, whatever you want to call it. And the second movie being Empire, people thought that that's what The Last Jedi was going to be. It was going to be like the dark one where the bad guys are winning and, it's the best one or the most greedy or whatever. And I still think you can see some of that in The Last Jedi where, the villains actually do kind of win in the end. Most of the resistance is completely annihilated and the good guys are only win because they didn't all die, and a couple of dozen were able to escape with the help of everybody except for Benicio del Toro's character and in connection Finn and Rose's little side quest that they went on. Some people didn't like the militaristic political commentary of that casino planet. And I can totally understand that, even though it doesn't really play big into the entire story of this third trilogy at all. I didn't have a problem with Rose's character at all, and obviously I still love Finn. I did not like that little side quest, and that one was, there was a lot of subversion of expectations in this movie, right? They thought they were going to get the hacker with the pum bloom, and then they get arrested. It all could have been prevented if they didn't park in the goddamn beach, right? So if they didn't park on the beach, then they got the pum bloom and he's able to hack, and then they don't get turned over and they're able to not get tracked through hyperspace anymore, which was actually shown in Rogue One. Hyperspace tracking was a little thing. That's a fun little nod there. Whether it was intended to be used in the future or not, I don't know. I don't know if it's explained in some commentary or if we'll hopefully hear somebody talk about it in the future or something like that. It's still really cool regardless. So a lot of things could have been avoided, and that side quest ended up being a complete failure, right? Outside of the fact that Finn got to kill Phasma, right? And we got to see Holdo do that awesome hyperspace attack. Now, let's talk about that. That was the money shot of that movie. In Rogue One, the awesome money shot was having Akbar's guys get the Corellian hammerhead, or was it Corellian? I can't remember. But getting the hammerhead ship to hit that ion blasted Star Destroyer to crash into the other one to fucking shear it off like a can opener. That was the dope shot of that movie. But The Last Jedi's big moment obviously was Holdo launching the ship into hyperspace, into blasting through Snoke's ship. A lot of people have problems with that. It was like the quiet moment in the movie where everyone was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That was a cool moment to experience in the theaters. I think we can all agree about that. But some people had a problem with it. Some people that, once again, pretend to be hardcore Star Wars fans that tend to forget everything else about Star Wars. People are like, oh man, how come not everyone's doing this? How come everyone isn't launching light speed into killing people? Because that wouldn't work. So, when it comes to light speed, and I don't know if I'm the only one who's tried to explain this or defend this or anyway, but we've seen since the 70s, whenever the Falcon or anything goes into light speed, the stars, the little bright dots in the sky, start to become streaks, right? And the Falcon just goes zoom. that's not going from zero, or that's not going, 50 knots to light speed instantly. You have to have acceleration, right? So in order for there to be acceleration, in order for those stars to start streaking and then being in the little light speed blue tunnel that we always see, right? When they go into hyperspace, first the stars go into streaks, so it's accelerating. You have to the thing doesn't go from normal Falcon speed or normal ship speed to instantly light speed. It has to get to light speed. And while it's getting to light speed, it still is going to have mass. For light speed travel to make sense, it has to be moving so fast where you're able to just fly through everything without worrying about hitting something and dying outside of the destination, right? So why it worked with Holdo is because she went into light speed so close to Snoke's ship that it didn't hit light speed yet. If something was going from light speed and happened to cross through Snoke's ship, it would have passed right through. But since Holdo, the resistance ship was so close to Snoke's ship, it had to accelerate to light speed through Snoke's ship. So it started to go very fast, but it wasn't at light speed yet, so it still had mass, so it was able to destroy and just completely clip Snoke's ship. I think that was a very, very cool shot. It was done very well. The no sound, the multiple camera angles of it, and the sheer destruction that it forced. I think it's really cool, and I will defend that shot, not just because it was a cool shot and otherwise, unremarkable movie in compared to how good I thought The Force Awakens was. But I will defend people saying how that doesn't make sense. How come not everybody's doing that? Because you would have to be at the right distance, and it's such a high cost sending an entire ship to do one attack, right? So I think that was a great shot, and it was handled well, and it makes perfect science fiction sense within the Star Wars universe. So if that's something you had a problem with, and you still do, please leave a comment down below, because I'd be curious how... I honestly don't know how anyone else defends that point, but that's how I see it, because I've watched every Star Wars movie, I've played almost every Star Wars video game, and I've read quite a lot about Star Wars. I haven't, come into the extended universe as far as like my dad or a bunch of other people have in the past, but when it comes to Star Wars, when it comes to most things throughout, let's say, just the films, I know Star Wars. And when it comes to that light speed attack, makes perfect sense to me as someone who knows Star Wars, right? So, when it comes to Luke doing his projection, the Mary Poppins thing, right? A lot of people had a problem with Leia flying through space. And I can go 50-50 on this. I thought it was... listen, she is the daughter of Anakin Skywalker. She is the sister of Luke Skywalker. So she's, the sister to one of the most powerful Jedi ever. And she's the daughter of one of the most powerful Jedi and or Sith ever. So she's going to be inherently more in tune with the Force, right? We know she's Force sensitive. You know that from Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. She's able to feel Luke's presence. She knows where he is. And, I hope Luke wasn't on that thing when it blew up. He wasn't, I know. And then, they get the whole, he's my brother thing, right? We know she's sensitive, Force sensitive, and it only makes sense. You also have, Donnie Chen's character in Rogue One, who clearly is Force sensitive, not a Jedi, as he clearly states, but the guy's blind and he's able to do some freaking amazing things. You also have Maz Kanata, who is clearly Force sensitive. I know the Force, and there's even a deleted scene. I don't know if it was ever rendered or anything, but when her place comes down, she uses the Force. She actually can use the Force to lift the rubble and then gets out. I don't know if we're ever going to get that explanation, that story from her on how she got Luke's lightsaber from Bespin, but it is what it is. We do know that originally Force Awakens was going to open with Luke's severed hand holding his lightsaber. That was we know one of the original ideas for how Force Awakens was going to open. And that makes sense when we have later Maz having the lightsaber. So there might have been a connection or a story there that we didn't get to see, or that the writers were not able to flesh out because that was left on the cutting room floor, right? So we knew that they had those plans. And you could also argue about Rey's parentage, right? I think it's perfectly fine and acceptable that she is the daughter of junk trader nobodies that sold her off to Unkar Plot. I think that's absolutely fine because it bunks the thing that, there's this chosen one from this amazing bloodline, right? She's not a Skywalker. She's not a Kenobi. She's not a Windu or a Mundi or whatever. I think that, a lot of people try to attribute a woman's journey and her power to something a man did, right? So a lot of people are like, the only reason Rey can be this good is because she's the daughter of some man that was awesome, right? There's definitely, a bit of a sexism to play in there, which is nothing new to a lot of Star Wars fans, as I've mentioned already in this podcast. But I think it's nice because, Anakin was conceived by the Force, right? He's Jesus, Shmi carried him to full term. She was conceived by the Force, midichlorians off the charts, right? People have a problem with that, but it is what it is, okay? People don't like midichlorians. People don't like that he was conceived by the Force or a lot of the prequels, right? Or have it be, Jake or Hayden's acting, whatever. That's still Anakin Skywalker's story. So and the fact that Luke is the son of the chosen one that was supposed to bring balance in the Force, and I think you can argue he did bring balance in the Force. There was only one Sith and a million Jedi. He kills all but one Jedi, or all but two Jedi, and becomes a Sith. So now it's 2 and 2. You could say that brought balance to the Force, but then Yoda died, and Obi-Wan died, and then Yoda died, and so then you have Luke. So he's a Jedi, and now there's 1 Jedi and 2 Sith. So he kills Palpatine. So now it's 1 and 1 again, and then he dies, and it's like what's he gonna do? So you could argue that Anakin or Vader or whatever, he balanced the Force a couple of times. That dude was a Force balancer, pure numbers wise. And Luke was obviously the son of him, so it makes sense why he was so powerful. And people trying to attribute Rey's connection with the Force to either being a Skywalker, to like people, Kylo Ren's sister or whatever, or being a Kenobi, because we don't know what he did until we get to see our boy reprise the role of Obi-Wan on Disney Plus. Super excited for that. Huge Obi-Wan fan, like totally favorite character for the first 6 movies, and now I got my girl Rey. So while that wouldn't be the biggest bummer to me, I think is a lot cooler for Rey to be the daughter of nobody, because she's not the chosen one, she's not some prophecy. The Force had to be balanced, and it awoken in this once again little orphan kid on a desert planet, sure. But she's I don't think that she's the daughter of some powerful person or people. And we do know that Rian Johnson's explanation that Kylo gave could be a lie, and that JJ can do his own thing. Both sides acknowledge that they can keep and get rid of what they want from what the story was told from The Last Jedi as they see fit. And who knows how Palpatine plays into this. We did get to see his cloak on some sort of chair that seemed to be moving in the final trailer. And people have speculated that Rey is a clone because we saw the snap thing when she was in the little dark side pit. Is she a clone of Palpatine? Is she some pet project from Project Resurrection that had something to do with not only bringing the First Order back by abducting all these kids and making them into stormtroopers, but obviously Palpatine has to have been doing something this whole time. He has this little throne with a bunch of scratches on it, so we're not going to know anything about that until the movie actually comes out. Whether Rey is a clone or a daughter of nobody or a daughter of somebody, obviously, that's going to be explained. And the only people that know are the people who worked on the Rise of Skywalker. And while we're on the subject, a lot of people have been speculating about what the Rise of Skywalker means. Since all the Skywalkers are gone, except for Ben and Leia, and we know they're going to be reusing footage from unused scenes from The Last Jedi, which I guess we can also talk about that title, to use Leia in the final film, which was going to be her film, much like Force Awakens was Han's film and The Last Jedi was Luke's film. This was supposed to be Leia's film, according to Kathleen Kennedy, I believe, said that. And I absolutely believe in her vision and everything that she has done pretty much in her entire career. So I absolutely trust her, and everything that she does as the creative director over there for Star Wars when it comes to multiple projects throughout all the different mediums. But, okay, so before we talk about The Rise of Skywalker, let's talk about The Last Jedi. Who is The Last Jedi? I think it was easy to say before the movie came out that it was Luke. He is the Last Jedi. Or you could say that Rey is the Last Jedi, which it makes it seem like at the end of the actual film, because he says to Kylo when he says, "I'm going to destroy the last of the Jedi," and he said, "Everything you just said is wrong." It definitely alludes to Rey being the Last Jedi, right? But I think still, even after hearing that Luke was the Last Jedi because of what he said. And I absolutely sympathize with Luke in his view of the Jedi. At the height of their power, they let the Empire come to fruition and let Palpatine destroy them all. The Jedi way is wrong, and we know that by watching the goddamn prequels, right? The Jedi way is stupid, and it's bullshit. And you can definitely read the parallels if you read the Green Lantern Blackest Night with the Yellow Lanterns basically being the Sith or like, I don't know, I guess like Islamic terrorists, and creating the fear and having the Green Lanterns give up their rings in order to continue to love people. I think that is a very good parallel argument to why the Jedi are wrong. This whole celibacy and no love thing, I mean, that helped you create fucking Darth Vader, right? And it's a dumb thing. And while it might sound a little cliche or schmaltzy, Rose is kind of right. And what is going to help us win this war is not killing those that we hate, but saving those that we love. And while love conquering all, or friendship, winning out in the end, is kind of like a tropey, overused cliche in a lot of different mediums, it's still kind of true and touching, whether you're taking real life parallels or not. So the Jedi were absolutely wrong in their practices of not only not allowing them to have romance, or the Jedi couldn't really decide on what they wanted to be. Were they peacekeepers? Were they diplomats? Why'd they send Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan on this trade negotiation thing? And we're not soldiers. Mace Windu said that explicitly, and then they kind of had to be, and then they all became like generals during the Clone Wars. And you could argue that the Clone Wars was just like a throwaway line from the first movie that spawned its own movie, as I've talked about one line turning into a movie a couple of times already. And that did kind of happen. George even kind of says so, a little bit, in one of those behind the scenes or commentaries or making of. But when it comes to the Rise of Skywalker, the way I see it is, and it's very interesting for them to have that as the title. Some people believe, and for many reasons, that Ben is the actual hero of the story. We did see Rey with this red lightsaber. That could have been like a Dagobah evil little forest section vision kind of thing, or it could be like a Palpatine clone kind of thing. So there's definitely a lot of possibilities, but a lot of people want the boy to be the hero and the girl to turn evil and be the villain, right? Even a lot of women want that as well. But a lot of people want Ben to be the hero because he's the guy. He's moody and he's powerful, and people say like, oh, he earned this or whatever. But I think with how The Last Jedi went, he is completely foregone. Like, yes, he did kill Snoke, and him and Rey did team up and take out those guards. We know that the Knights of Ren are going to be in the Rise of Skywalker. It's in the Lego sets for Rise of Skywalker. I don't know if you've seen them, but I happen to see them at Disneyland, so the Knights of Ren are there. So we'll probably get to see that. And we haven't seen much from the trailers at all. And since this is, as we've been told, the final trailer, we're not given a lot. And I'm perfectly fine with that. I think I only watched like the first full-length trailer for Force Awakens, and I didn't want to see anything else after that. And I was totally happy with that and not trying to read up on people's speculations and stuff. I like just, doing that stuff on my own, sure, but I wasn't really interested in trying to see what other people would try to figure out. And people have all these other theories that have just been wrong over and over and over again. That doesn't mean it's wrong for them to do that. It's quite fun, and you can have these theories that are totally wrong, but are still kind of neat to think about and all that good stuff. But I think with what Kylo Ren did, made him that he I wouldn't put it past JJ and the team to have him turn to the good at the end. I still think that is possible, especially with that now that you're bringing back Palpatine. But he seems irredeemable at this point because he killed his father. He wanted to kill Luke so much, and he now harbors this resentment and probably a lot of hatred towards Rey as well for not joining him. She thought he would join her because she saw that he was going to turn against Snoke, and he did turn against Snoke, so that kind of made her think that this was going to happen, and he thought that she was going to join him. So there's that thing, and the Reylo shippers are a thing that I do not endorse personally, and I'm almost certain is not going to happen. I don't see those two ending up together. Nor do I see her being with Poe, even though they say hi at the end of the last movie. A lot of people were going crazy over that, even though Finn Poe shippers are like the biggest thing when it comes to this trilogy, right? So, the way I see it is that Luke was the Last Jedi, and Rey is the Rise of Skywalker. Not because she is a Skywalker, not because Ben is a Skywalker, but the way that I first interpreted it when it was announced what the final film was going to be called, the way I immediately saw it was the Jedi are gone, and Luke was right in all of his malfeasances that he had against the Jedi, and he's completely right in everything that he said in The Last Jedi, and how it doesn't belong to the Force, doesn't belong to them. It's everybody's, and they were foolish at the height of their power. They let the Empire happen, right? They were dumb. They were foolish. Obviously, it would have been Windu was right. He was too dangerous to be kept alive, and he should have killed Palpatine. And Anakin did his thing. So not every Jedi acted irrationally or was terrible. And Qui-Gon going up against the Jedi Order and trying to take on a new Padawan, and Obi-Wan taking him. That's whatever. I think that's absolutely fine with what those characters and what they believed in. But I think the Jedi are done with, and hopefully once Kylo is defeated or turns and Palpatine is resolved, and however that's supposed to be resolved, is the rise of Skywalker. Skywalkers, plural. To replace the Jedi. That the Jedi are done and gone, and now you have the Skywalkers, and that Rey is the first of. You also have that little kid with the broom, clearly has the Force, so there have always been Force-sensitive creatures, beings out there that could be trained to become Jedi or Sith or whatever. And you also have the Jedi Sentinels, right? The orange lightsaber guys that would use both light and dark side powers, and that kind of was always a fun thing to think about. Of you have the Jedi Outcast or the Jedi Knight games with Kyle Katarn, right? as well as the Force Unleashed games, where you have a good guy also using Sith lightning, but also using the Jedi mind trick and stuff like that. That's kind of like a fun thing to think about, but Luke is right in that you can't have the dark without the light and light without the dark, and there needs to be a balance. And, as Rey was saying when she was tapping into everything, that she sensed light and dark, life and death, and between it all, a balance of force. And so I think the Skywalkers as a name is the embodiment of that evolution of what the Jedi should have been, in getting rid of the old ways, burning down the ancient text, even though, yes, Rey did steal them. People also had a problem with Yoda being able to lightning strike even though he's a ghost. This is very easily explainable. He's fucking Yoda, and it's at the very first Jedi temple. If there's any way that there's able to be a Force ghost using lightning to strike down a tree, it's going to be under those circumstances. Fucking Yoda at like the epicenter of the start of the Jedi Order is conjuring a lightning to strike a tree. I don't have a problem with that, but other people are weirded out that how is this dead guy able to do something that affected the real world? It's Yoda at the first Jedi temple. Get over it, okay? So obviously Luke is going to be a ghost. We know he's in the movie. We hear his voice in the trailers. It seems like Palpatine is not a ghost, which was definitely a possibility. He seems to have some sort of corporeal form based off of what we saw from this last trailer, although that could be a red herring or something to throw us off, or maybe, quasi-true. Also, you have at the end of The Last Jedi, Return of the Jedi, he gets thrown down that shaft and there's all this blue flame, right? That doesn't seem like a normal death of someone being thrown down that kind of shaft. It definitely seemed quite evil in its ways, and him being part of the Death Star and tied to it, where it seems like, I don't know if it has been officially stated or not, but that the Rise of Skywalker takes place on the forest moon of Endor, maybe Endor itself, that has pieces of the exploded second Death Star, which clearly is where Palpatine has been residing this whole time. Maybe he's tethered to it. People have started throwing out these Horcrux theories that Rey and Kylo are working together to stop him or something, which is completely plausible at this point. And I think the movie looks really good, and I can't wait for it, and I think I'm going to really like it. I thought I was really going to like Last Jedi, and I only kind of liked it, but I love that JJ came back. I definitely think he regrets not doing this entire trilogy. In retrospect, even though he probably wouldn't say that now because, it's like, oh, I think, everything worked out the best for this and that. It's whatever. But he did come back. So I think that is very, very telling that he came back to do this his second film, but the third film in this third trilogy. So that is what I think. I think that Luke was the last Jedi, that the last hope of the Jedi is in Rey, and that she is going to start the Skywalkers. And I think that'd be pretty cool. I don't know, is C-3PO dying or something? I don't know what was in that last trailer. I don't know what's going on with Palpatine, or what kind of wisdom we're going to be hearing from Luke, or any other sort of additional information about the past that we're going to be getting in this final installment. And who knows what future movies hold in store. There is that rumor that Knights of the Old Republic is going to be turned into a trilogy, probably only loosely based off of the video games. But one thing that does help that argument is that if you go to Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland or Disney World, when you build a lightsaber, you can build one of those old Knights of the Old Republic era lightsabers. That would totally make sense for them to do that in advance of a demand for it when you start seeing a bunch of them in future movies. I think that would be really cool. It definitely gives them a little bit of freedom because you're way, way, way in the past. You're also going to get a ton of action and a ton of hype for seeing a bunch of Sith and a bunch of Jedi fight, tons of huge action sequences, but like, maybe they use some of the characters from the games. Maybe they're just using kind of the setting and they kind of do their own thing about, characters and enemies and storylines and holocrons or whatever. I think that's a very smart and very, very cool decision that frees them up while also kind of building on what has already been there. And what they want to do past that with any other future movies, because we all know Disney is about making money, and we are going to be seeing more Star Wars movies past this one. But we do know the Skywalker saga is over. Maybe we will see some other characters from the Skywalker saga in other films, probably as minor characters or as cameos or like very obscure characters. We have IG-88 coming to The Mandalorian that people really loved. That's super cool. They talked about Bosk during Solo. We could have got him on his cute little spacesuit. A little too many nods in that movie for my liking, but it's still kind of cool as a Star Wars fan to be able to see the attempt at them trying to tie everything together. But not everything has to be explained. Not everything needs its own story. But we are going to be still seeing tons of Star Wars content. And also, we're going to have to see what is going to be coming of the Obi-Wan show, as well as future movies, because we do know that Darth Maul is alive. The Clone Wars cartoons are still canon. We do know that he still fought Obi-Wan a couple of times and was just living off the hatred of Obi-Wan and still kept losing to the dude. But he is ahead of his own little crime syndicate, as we've seen. Emilia Clarke now is like his number one after Paul Bettany's character died. I've only seen the movie twice, so I don't remember all the characters' names super duper well at this juncture. So I think there is a reason to expect Darth Maul in an upcoming Star Wars movie, because I was pretty much explicitly told so. I have my sources. One-on-one, first-hand source that Darth Maul is being planned to be used in an upcoming Star Wars movie, which is not surprising after seeing him at the end of Solo. Whether they wanted to backtrack from the not so successful movie of Solo and wanting to really nail things down so we don't get another disaster in production or not failure. That movie still obviously made a bunch of money, but not nearly on par with Rogue One or Force Awakens or even The Last Jedi. It was definitely not good that they kind of had two missteps in a row, with Last Jedi not performing nearly as well as Force Awakens and Solo not performing nearly as well as Rogue One. That was very difficult for them to have kind of two not huge hits in a row, to have them kind of, it's like, all right, let's focus on Mandalorian and Cassian and his show, and bringing back Ewan McGregor for Obi-Wan is absolutely fantastic. So maybe we'll see Darth Maul in Obi-Wan's show. We'll see what he gets to do with those many years that he has in between episode 3 and episode 4. And obviously you have The Mandalorian, which takes place in between episode 6 and episode 7. So there's a lot to flesh out, and there's a lot of more cool Star Wars to look forward to in the future. Obviously, I'm going to see and absorb it all, whether it be the new video game that's coming out, the new movie that's coming out, or anything else in the future, or any future rides that will be coming out. I'm going to experience it all, give my own opinion about it, and enjoy it while it's here. And I suggest you all do so as well. If you have any comments or questions or suggestions or anything that I brought up, absolutely leave it in the comments. And I know this was kind of rambly. I expected it to be so, talking about Star Wars, but glad I did it.